Welcome back to the program. Super excited for what we're going to be talking about today. Storytelling and building strategic narratives. So today I have on the show a special guest. This is Guillaume Wiatr. Listen in.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Guillaume, thank you so much for being on the program today. Welcome.
Mike, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been waiting for this moment for a while, and I think your podcast is just bringing so much value to the business community. So I was excited to be here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we dive in, and I'm really excited because I do so much about communication and work with people on really how to tell a story. And before we dive into that I know people are going to love, tell us a little bit about who you are and really what you bring to this realm of business.
I'm a French guy in Seattle. That's really who I am at the core. But that ties to my professional journey, really, because I started in the entrepreneurship world and in the consulting world over 22 years ago. And quickly realized that, I come from a family of entrepreneur, and we realized this was going to be my journey for a while. I didn't know how long. And so now I am here 22 years later. I'm here in Seattle. I'm the principal and founder of a boutique strategy consulting firm called MetaHelm. And what MetaHelm specializes in is helping CEOs and founders to build a strategic narrative. And we do this to help them, number one, align everyone inside and outside the company. And number two, accelerate the adoption of innovation. And that ranges across industries. We're not focused on a specific industry. We are not focused on a particular company size, but we are interested in working with courageous leaders who are there to advance the way the market operates. And that's when a strategic narrative comes in to help really rally people around a new idea and make sure that the business leaders can really help everyone understand their business, get behind it, and believe in it. And this is really a problem that I've been seeing and been faced with early on in my career. Like, how do you have this great idea, you've got this great invention, how do you make people excited about it? Yeah. Not just you and your team, but how do you make people really compelled to provide funding, provide partnership? And how do you keep, people aligned as the company grows? So that's what we do here at MetaHelm.
I love it. Great ideas that are going to come out of this time too. So one of the things that you and I were talking about briefly beforehand, and one of the things that is going to show up in the title on YouTube and on the podcast is that you say business storytelling is dead, build a strategic narrative instead. So that's our caption that we've agreed upon. That's what's going to go there. But I pushed back in beforehand and I said, one of the biggest books right now is Story Brand by Donald Miller. Mm-hmm. I've been reading him for 20 years and I see him all over the place in the airports when I travel. So how can business storytelling be dead if that's a main book that's out there?
Well, I think to answer the question, we have to be in the right context. What do I mean by this? I mean in the context of the companies that I serve, which are companies that are faced with problems of alignment and innovation. So if you have a company that is selling a commodity that is already self-positioned because maybe you're doing roofing, you have a small business, or maybe you're in the service business, maybe you're an attorney, or maybe you have a tech company that provides a service that already everybody knows. I think the story brand approach is great. I mean, it assumes that how your people perceive what you do outside the market. And so you could say, yeah, let's use a story to do better marketing and better sales, and that will work fine. And that's what I did. I've been reading Donald Miller for many years and tried to use his approach. And with my clients, I think it has worked great. When the case was, we're not disrupting anything. We're just, doing something that people already know. Now, when you approach, things in uncharted territory, that's when things get complicated. I would argue that your company doesn't have a story, like we hear all the time, like, what's our story? I think a company has many stories, in fact, hundreds of stories. If you think about your customer stories, if you think about your personal story as a leader, your team stories, and what you do out there in the community, you can think of a really big network of stories. And the difficulty is, how do I make sense of that system of stories, right? What's the common denominator? And in my experience, that's where most forward-thinking entrepreneurs will really struggle. Like, which one do we tell and when, right? And you probably see this in your coaching practice, because I know you also coach, many CEOs. And one of the key questions is, like, should I talk about me? Should I talk about my clients? Should I talk about my team? And when is that, right? So that's the topic here. So approaching this problem with the simple idea that, hey, we're just going to build one story around that network, around that problem, and kind of hide it, to me, is just too surface level. We have to address this at a deeper level. And so when I think about how to do that, I think about more like, what is the point of view of your company? What does your company stand for? And that's what is, to me, a narrative, similar to, like, political movements have a narrative and they call it the political platform, right? And in business, we wouldn't say we have a political platform, but maybe we have a narrative, which is really the set of beliefs and everything that gathers all those stories together. So when you start to think about, okay, let's build a system of stories, now it starts to make sense. Also, a system is something you can intentionally. Many people will just, throw stories out there without really realizing what kind of impact they have. So my approach is different. My approach is for a very specific context. I am not against storytelling. I think it's the greatest thing that humankind has created. What I am in favor of is being smarter about it. And that's why I say storytelling, business storytelling 1.0, in the way we've traditionally, used it, is kind of dead. Like, we have to move on, and we have to realize that, what we need is better alignment, just better, companies who stand for something a little stronger. And storytelling is just not enough. That's my point.
I think that when you were talking there, I thought about the book by Will Smith. I just recently finished that one. And in it, there's lots of stories. And there's not just one story that's part of his life. He framed his book, probably with some great help, in a masterful way as this narrative about his will to succeed and the pros and cons of that. And all these stories illustrate different components of that will to succeed.
Okay, so I love
talking about that.
So I love this. So I didn't read this book.
You should. It's amazing. Actually, you should listen to the book, because it is probably one of the best narrated books in the world. And if people listen to his book, they'll probably become better speakers.
Great. I'll add it to my list. I have a very long list, and I love books behind me. And so what you're describing is exactly what I am preaching.
Yeah.
Many stories will form a narrative, will form a point of view, right? But it requires many stories to do that. And so Will Smith in his book probably, takes stories from his existence. I didn't read the book, but I'm assuming probably experiences, anecdotes, people he met, reflections he had, probably borrowing stories from other people. And that's what we do all day long when we are building and launching and growing businesses. We live in this world of storytelling, but if we leave this as an unorganized quagmire of references and vocabulary and language, it becomes chaos. In fact, research shows that in companies of 1,000 people overall, only 10% of people know where the company is really going. Only 10% can make sense and have a meaningful understanding of where this company is headed, because they're just lost in so many stories. Maybe the marketing department has a story for the outside, and then internally the HR department has another story for them that doesn't quite really align. And then they go to work with R&D or operations, and other stories show up. So what do we do now? There's no narrative, right?
Right.
Compared to this, you open Will Smith's book and there's a clear narrative. There is one point of view, one thing, we could summarize it in one line, maybe, I'm guessing, but supported by dozens and dozens of stories. That's what I help people build.
I think that's so important, because I think you're right, especially if you think about a traditional business, a large business. I've been in them, worked with them. Sometimes they're very compartmentalized.
Yeah, they're very sad.
Yeah, and they all have their own stories.
Yeah.
Versus then there's other ones that are, well, yeah, they're broken down to compartments, they're different divisions or whatever you want to call them.
Yep.
However, they're weaving together this one story. And one of the books I love about Patrick Lencioni, he talks about the silos, politics, and turf wars. What's the part of the story? What's the part of the narrative, to use your language, that you're working on?
Yeah.
Have you read that book, The Silos, Politics, and Turf Wars? Somewhere over here.
No, but I guess that's another one I should catch. I have many other books for you too.
Yeah. It's a 20-plus-year-old book.
Let me write it down. I know the name though, Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah, his I can't remember if it's that one or another one, but really talks about grabbing the entire team, no matter what part of the team you're on, and working together on one part of the story, to use your terminology.
Yeah.
Break down for us very, very concisely, what is the key difference then? And we've kind of hinted at it, but what's the key difference between telling a story, specifically a business story, and then building a narrative?
There's very, very, very specific things that I lay out in my latest ebook. So the first thing to keep in mind is, what is a story for? We say a story engage, right? We want to engage people. We want to connect with them. We want to create a connection. And so we talk about an audience, right? So on the other hand, if you look at movements that you see around us, and companies that really have this magnetic, field around them, they not only engage people, they not only treat people as an audience, but they will treat them as a participant. They will find them a role, and they will be really good at bringing them into what they are trying to achieve. And over the past decade or 2 decades or so, if you look at how successful companies spend some of their budgets, they create more events. They want to be connected directly with people, and people can actually connect directly to people inside the company. So one of the big differences, is to just summarize this particular point, is stories engage, narratives will mobilize people. So the difference is, great, I've heard your story, I closed the book, okay, interesting, and maybe I'll connect with your brand. Engaging is, I'm inviting to do something, right? And there are many, many strategies about this. Another way to look at this difference is to say that stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? It's the traditional hero's journey. And that's what, again, Donald Miller talks beautifully in his book. At the end, here's success. And here is what you've achieved if you buy our product or help or work with us. A narrative is open-ended. We don't know yet. Like if you look at large companies like Tesla's, or some of my clients here on the West Coast are really trying to shift away. For instance, we organize multi-site organizations, do networking in a cyber world that is very uncertain. So we have a beginning. We know where we are today. We have a middle. This is what we're thinking we're going to do. And we have no end. We don't know yet. We acknowledge that the world is too uncertain for us, and we can't promise that we will be successful.
Wait. I mean, 2020, I had mapped out my whole plan for the year, and it was exactly what I planned. No, I'm just kidding. But I had mapped out the entire year.
Who are you?
Yeah, I'm responsible for COVID. No.
I went with this guy.
Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, it's uncertain. Crazy things can happen.
Exactly. And I think more and more companies recognize that there is more value, more power in just letting down a little bit of their guard and being more vulnerable, and to say, look, we have a product that will enable to, just emit less CO2. Say we want to put new electric cars on the market, and we think this is the way to go. But can we guarantee that? Not sure. We're trying our best. Are you willing to take, to share some of the risk with us? This is the product. This is how much it costs, and how it's designed, and we've designed it to the best of our abilities. But will it achieve the opportunity that we're all thriving for? We think so, but there is a level of uncertainty. So if you're into this narrative mode, what you're doing is that you're letting the door open again to invite people to participate. And you will see this very, very clearly in the communications of CEOs of very, very well-known companies. I mean, Elon Musk does this very, very well. He always leaves the door open, for uncertainty. And the way he speaks, is that he leaves this kind of question mark that people have, and therefore, it makes people more curious. So that's what the narrative does. Another thing that I've already talked about a little bit is this idea, like audience versus participants. Is really, how do you make people more responsible for how they engage with you? How do you bring them into new experiences and new things like that? So that's three of there are other differences, but that's the three biggest one you can think about if you're going to build the strategic narrative.
And you hinted at something here about why strategic narratives are really important at this point in time.
Yeah.
And there's probably multiple reasons, but one of them is potentially the uncertainty of what's going on. I mean, who would have known that this would happen with COVID, or that this would happen over here with Ukraine-Russia war and all the different things going on here. What are other reasons why strategic narratives are so vital during this junction in business world?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. There's so many reasons. The way our society works has evolved quite a bit. People don't want just to be, passive consumers of brands who throw product at them. Like I said, I'm gonna kind of maybe sound like a broken record. I know you like records,
I got but I don't like them broken.
Another common point we have. But the way we operate society is different. People want to they'll buy a story. People will pay for a story. People will die for a narrative. That's one other difference that I forgot to mention here. We want to be associated with brands that stand for our values, right? So in the world we live in, we have to realize that building the traditional companies that stands for, something we've developed in silos, and there it is, and this is what you get and all that, this is a little bit outdated now. People, if you look at the workplace, the workplace is now in your living room. The workplace is here in your home these days. And so what is the relationship that we entertain with brands? It's different. It's radically different. So the way we entertain we see ourselves part of a brand that we're not only consumer of, but also co-workers from, has to be different. So that's another thing. So now, if you go into strictly business benefits for strategic narrative, here are the few that I always see that, people come to me for. Number one is differentiation. If you have a narrative, you will start to really, really stand out in a crowded market. If you look at let me pick an example, like maybe CRMs, like marketing automation market. All companies pretty much say the same thing. What they compete on is, we're doing the same thing, but better. Who do I believe as a buyer, right? If you have a strategic narrative, you differentiate, because what you will do is to start advertising your beliefs before you advertise your product. For instance, you will stand for something that people didn't realize that matter to the market, and you will start telling things that everybody kind of knew about but was kind of afraid to say. So that's another element of it. And then the other thing that I see all the time is adoption. Your strategic narrative really frames why people should get your product, and puts it into context. Really, it creates that urgency that very few people may have realized. Like, okay, why do we need to switch to, say, a subscription model versus just a product model? Because everybody else is shifting there. So what's happening around us? How do you do this in this context? I guess I took an example that now is maybe 5-10 years old. So there are new things happening in around us. But really, the way I look at adoption is, through creating a new narrative, really drive this. Like, let's set some context around why people need to buy our product today.
I think this is very fascinating. Even if you go back at one of the iconic brands about storytelling or narratives, would be Apple.
Yep.
And when you said buy into the belief, there was that 1985
Yes.
or something where the ad where the guy comes running and he's dressed differently and everybody else is in the suit and it's black and white. It almost looks like Matrix, pre-Matrix, way before Matrix came out. And the guy takes the hammer and throws it. It has very little to do about the actual Macintosh, but it's about what they're buying into. And then there's the classic, what was that guy's name? It was in the 90s and the early 2000s. There was the ad, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC.
Oh, yeah. I remember that ad, yes.
And they're buying into this kind of hip vibe versus just the story, or they're buying into a narrative. We're happening. We're amazing. We're doing all this. How does a company not stop their narrative? Because even if you think of Apple, I mean, there's been some highlights, for example, Mac versus PC, and then the avant-garde of launching 1,000 pocket sounds in your pocket. But how do you keep that momentum going? Because there's a Sigmund bell curve, right? It's going to end.
Yeah, I love that question, Mike, because I think that it's another difference between the story and narrative. A story has happened already. It's past. It has occurred. A narrative is still way more future oriented. So it's going to change. It's going to change because your company shifts, your company grows, the market conditions will change, the society will change, and the environment will change. Regulations will show up all of a sudden, and suddenly you can't market or sell the products you used to. So you have to adapt constantly, and so you're going through what I call those, what's called those S curves, right? You grow and then you come to maturity. I love the fact that you picked Apple, because in the case of Apple, if we look at the story of Apple started with a narrative from the get-go. Jobs had this idea for his product even before the first the first Apple computer was even built.
Yeah.
Right. His idea was, I wanted to, I may paraphrase a little bit here, don't quote me on this, but
he's looking at me there on the bookshelf.
Looking at you. There. Okay. So basically what's the narrative of Apple is, at the time in the late 70s, 80s, is, give people, freedom of expression. Right. And so that's why in 84 and then in the 90s, there's another campaign about, giving that power to people who take risk, who will change the world. And there is that beautiful ad campaign in black and white with significant people who really have impacted the world. So that was from the get-go, even before the first product was built. That was the narrative. What happened during the course of Apple's life? Jobs was fired. I think, and he was away building other great companies, Next, and then Pixar's. Starting on other narratives, by the way, and Apple lost his narrative, right? So what does this tell us? It tells us that there is no great narrative without great leadership. You can come up with a beautiful story that your marketing department developed and have a weak leader, and your business may work still fine, right? In fact, most leaders think of storytelling as an act of literature, and that's why they'll tell you, I can't write the story. I'm not a good writer. I'm not a good communicator. So that's why they need coaching, which is great. But building a narrative is an act of leadership. And I love that you took, Apple's example, because that's how you move through the ebbs and flows of your market and continuously adapt. You connect your narrative to your leadership. Who are you as a leader? Why did you join or start the company in the first place? And how do you intend to personally take this company forward? That's the key element right there.
One of the things that this applies into personal life is, what's the narrative of your life?
Yeah.
And sometimes we get so stuck with the stories of what happened. Okay, I did that, and that was great. And sometimes we always want to go back. And so even right now, when my wife and I were like asking ourselves, let's just say yes to things. So we're going hot air ballooning here soon, and we're just
Very
trying
cool.
some different things. Let's just try something. Let's just say yes. And we have opportunities. Now, you can't do that in the business world, say yes to every single thing that comes your way.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about that strategic, and that's that word that you have in there, strategic narrative, it's not just letting things happen, right? It's thinking through the course of what fits into, I mean, Apple never did a whole bunch of things that it could have done.
Yeah.
But it had a strategic narrative. Now let's keep on going here. How do you make sure your narrative sticks? So it'd be easy to get lost in doing it, or move on past it, or you take all this time to develop something.
Yeah.
How do you make it stick?
I'm just going to go back one step and segue into your previous comments, is like intentionality, being strategic about it, and intentionality. So if you build a good strategic narrative, what you will trigger is a better positioning on the strategy map for your company, right? And so when you realize, okay, we thought our company was the airline, say, I'm just grabbing a random example that I, from clients that I work with. So airline, and we thought we were just going to be the best on time, safe airline, and it's all about safety and operations. And we realized that our positioning now should move into the airline that people love. I'm just making up something, right? More about relationship, right? That's a change in positioning. Well, this is going to have, so how do we make that stick? That's your question. Well, this is going to have major impact into many areas of your company, not just marketing, like storytelling is, by the way, but many areas of your company, like maybe operations, maybe research and development. For software companies, very much it's going to be about how we develop and build new features, or how do we sunset some that don't reflect our new identity and our new positioning anymore. So the answer is into constantly making the connection between the narrative and how it shows up, how you activate it, how you turn that narrative into not just telling a narrative, but believing a narrative, doing a narrative. So that requires, again, a special kind of leadership. That requires to be, very aware and have constant, scrutiny over how do we walk the talk, really. That's what you will do to make sure that it sticks with people. Because if you announce to the market that you're in favor of something, you have this point of view, right? You say, we're going to defend small businesses, say. I work with a client who has an app and a product for contractors to be better at marketing and invoicing and so on, the whole chain. And so if you do that, how does this narrative show up in your culture when they call you and you pick up the phone, right? You will probably sound very different than if you were a business to consumer company selling hotcakes. Right? You're talking to contractors.
That's my next business right there.
Is it?
Hotcakes.
Tell me about it.
Hotcakes are us. That's the brand.
So it's really that link, that chain link, sometimes very much missing. The reason I want to expand a little bit on my answer here, the reason why it's missing most of the time is because, again, the confusion between the story and narrative, sounds like the narrative is the marketing's job. And so I'm a CEO and marketing does it. I don't have much I'll kind of be involved a little bit and sign off on it, but these guys know what they're doing. And therefore, I don't have really deep knowledge of how it was built. And therefore, I don't know how to see if we're really activating it. And that's the problem right there. Like there's a disconnect between what marketing says and what operations will do. So one of the ways, another method to really make sure that it sticks is to make sure that whoever is in charge of the ship here, at the helm, that's why my company is called Meta Helm, knows about that narrative and applies it every day.
I love it. And that book is Meta Helm, and it will be in the show notes as well. Yep. An ebook released by Guillaume. So check that out. In the midst of the narrative sticking, it's making sure that the leadership has grabbed a hold of it. One of the things I was thinking about when he said this, I was recently speaking at a conference, 400 people. And as I was speaking, I was talking about this common leadership thing where really often we don't reward what we need to reward. And so just a little thought on this, on a very practical thing, is when you see people living the narrative, you got to reward that, because people will repeat what you reward. I mean, we know that with kids.
Yep.
People are going to do that which you say, good job. And just a small thing that people can take a hold of and
I like that.
practice.
Yeah, I like that. Reinforcing. And another one, maybe also empowering them to take initiatives to find new ways to live the narrative. Because you may, as a leader, you may think of ways, but everybody has ideas, right? Yet again, this is what a narrative is. It invites people to participate, not only outside, but inside, your team. I love that idea, Mike.
I was working for a large corporation at one point in time, and in that there was this huge relaunch of the entire company and brand new branding and shirts and all the different things that goes on. Just dropped the vision in a really big way. And this happens in a lot of different companies. We are now this, we now do this, and jump on the newest bandwagon. They're trying to change their narrative, but then they move on so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is, that there's this huge shift, but then there's a year later, it's almost like they've dropped this narrative, they dropped this brand initiative that they have?
I don't know which company specifically it is about, but let's generalize. It may be because they see this again as a campaign, so tied to a trend, and have not done a good enough job at tying back to their core roots and what people will be excited about. It's possible that if it's seen as a campaign, it's been developed by people who are very creative, will come with great ideas that people will be excited about, but maybe just a subset of the company is excited. And so it doesn't leave enough room to make sure that everyone is excited. It's basically a lot of blowing smoke.
Yeah.
If you pardon my expression, my French. But it's sometimes it's also measured in terms of the budget we will spend. I have seen companies building like rock solid narrative with almost zero budget. So there is that misconception that, yeah, you've got such a great narrative. Look at all the swags and the ads and the campaign and all, and it's great, that screen. But it also makes the company, the way to change is very rigid, because this is a very top-down approach.
Yeah.
Whereas if you let people really leave and give the time to people, to your point, or to reward them and really trying to find ways to leave that narrative, when it's time for the company to shift direction because there is a market change or there's a strategic movement here, everybody is already mobilized. So you don't have, it's not just a marketing campaign that people have to, first understand and then see if they believe it and decide if they're gonna, back it or not. It's already, more grassroots. So it's getting a little technical here, but that would be my interpretation of that problem.
I think you're hitting on something that sometimes people think that something good is something that is good for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then move to the next
True.
one.
I agree with you, Mike.
Or so many people go from book to book and it's like the whole organization shifts.
Yeah.
And so this, okay, now we're moving here instead of finding that theme that's pulling throughout it. It's one of the things that book by Will Smith does so great is, there is this very solid theme throughout it. And it's very entertaining to watch.
Will you add the reference to the books in the show notes too?
Yeah, to Will Smith.
Yeah, I love that.
We'll put that on there as well. It made me I've written several books and I'm narrating one of my books right now. And after I read or listened to his book, it actually made me a better narrator. Okay,
good.
One last question here. We were talking, and one of the things that you have talked about is that crafting mission statements is outdated. And when I read this here, I thought, wait a minute, because I actually tell people to craft, now I do this in my personal coaching, to craft a personal mission statement. And so, because so much of what I do is work with people, and I think if you lead ABC company, you should also lead YOU company. And if you know all things about your values as ABC company, you should also know the values of you as you company. But tell me what you mean by this, because we're going to come to terms here. And
did you have a heart attack when you saw me
Yeah,
And you-
when I read that, yeah, I was like, wait a minute,
like,
wait a
who's
minute.
this guy?
What's his take on this?
All right, so let's give some context because I'm all about context. What's the context in which I say this? I'm not against statements. What I'm against is, and I think it is ridiculously dated. It's ridiculous what's going on in companies where it's not about a personal statement versus about a team mission statement or a group or organization. So you bring people together. And the thing that, so early on in my career, I was brought into those exercises where we all congregate in that room and say, great, we have half a day to come up with our mission statements. And so everybody's excited for the first hour, and we do an icebreaker, and then we're presented a template. We are company XYZ, and for fill in the blank customers, we will do fill in the blank, outcomes and so on. And so what this does, it just turns the whole thing into like a group wordsmithing exercise to find a title of something that is much bigger than a mission statement. So the way I would rather see companies looking at this is to do, much deeper exploration about what does the mission mean for everyone, right? First of all, it's kind of like when you're writing a book, because you've written several books. You may have a title in mind at the beginning of the writing process. Correct me if I'm wrong. You might have a different process than me, but that's how it's been working for me. You start writing, and you may have a working title, but you don't decide on the final title until it launches. Correct?
Yeah, most of the time.
Most of the time. So, and I think for mission statement, it should be the same. It should be, we do the statement, we have a statement once we've really explored what the mission is about. So it's not going to happen in 1 day or 1 minute. It's going to happen in a much longer period of time. By the way, the mission may be expressed slightly differently. There may be some nuances based on who you are, and that's okay. Yeah. It's almost like a mission statement should be an evolutionary thing, a living thing, right? The other thing that I see all the time is like we've got mission statements that are impossible to use every day. They're the words are too complicated, the words are too convoluted, and so when do you use it? You don't. So you can't use it, so you don't remember it, so you don't apply it in your daily actions. So this is for organizational mission statement. I don't specialize in personal mission statement, but I have one, and everybody should probably have one. But I would guess you probably agree with me that it's not something you come up with in 5 minutes. It's probably, there's some soul searching behind this.
Yeah, actually, I talk about how to do that for public speaking in my 10th book that comes out next month.
Nice.
But with that, I think that what I'm thinking about as you wrote that statement and I read it, it's the crafting a mission statement is outdated. It's not the mission statement is outdated. It's that crafting, how people approach it. So it's not the idea of having
good.
It. Is that correct?
That's good. Yeah, that's good suggestion. That's good feedback, Mike. I'll take that. I'll probably change the title of that. I think it was an article that I wrote, a while ago. I think that's fair. That's fair to say. I think a very good statement is super useful when you crafted it correctly. Here's what my mission is to turn every single organization into a source of inspiration that you can resist. Mm-hmm. Right? I can say it. It took me years to really realize that.
Yeah.
And it was constant research.
Mine's morphed as well throughout the years because it is a living statement, and there's no doesn't mean have you write one down that you're now locked into it, but right. Really when you have one, it helps you identify what you're about. And so mine is helping people realize their potential.
Yeah, it helps you make better decisions too. I mean, right. You're faced with situations and you think about what you're here for. You take a step back and you go, well, in that case, here's the filter that I should use. I'm going to say yes to this and no to that.
Right. So mine is helping people realize their potential. So then I look at hotcakes are us. Right now, does that help people realize their potential?
Could.
Maybe their potential girth width. Hey, this has been so fun, Guillaume. This is fantastic. Talk to us about where people can find you and what your ebook is and anything else that you want to just make sure people have out there. And of course, we'll put these in the show notes.
Well, I am the strategic narrative guy. So just go to strategicnarrative.com. That's just as simple as that. And so when you go to, that will lead you to my company's website, part of it. And so you can download my ebook for free. It's called Strategic Narrative, a simple method that business leaders can use to help people understand their business, get behind it, and believe in it. And there is a very cool video where I actually narrated it. And so the feedback has been so far that I love the video so much better than the book because people can hear me, and I think there is more emotion. And I'm talking to an expert now, so that's your realm. But right, when you talk to people, when you communicate your beliefs, if it's done well, then there is more resonance. Okay, I'm going off track.
No, that's good. I like it. Strategicnarrative.com. By the way, I didn't say this beforehand, but you said you're French and obviously speak French as a result of that. I took my first French lesson recently. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. I speak Spanish. I grew up in Mexico, but now I want to have some
welcome to the real world.
I've been there. I just need now I've been to 3 French-speaking countries. Anyway, that's totally off topic. Good. Guillaume, this has been fantastic having you here. Thank you so much. We'll make sure we have those all in the show notes and for people to follow out and on the YouTube. But really, really appreciate your time.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. Your podcast is awesome. I've been listening to many episodes, and I was thrilled to be here today.
Thank you. And to all of those who listen and watch, we really appreciate you. We do this to help you realize your potential. So make sure that you share, you like, you subscribe, you comment, and we'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.